Thank you for listening to the Council of Institutional Investors' Voice of Corporate Governance. I'm Jeff Mahoney, General Counsel of CII. The purpose of these monthly episodes is to update CII members and the general public on significant developments in corporate governance and capital markets regulation and CII's related advocacy activities. This update covers the period from January 7th to February 5th, 2025. The following is my top 10 list of events over that period. Number 10, on January 30th, the Council of Institutional Investors Executive Director Robert McCormick was appointed by the trustees of the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation to the IFRS Advisory Council. The IFRS Advisory Council provides strategic advice to the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation trustees, the International Accounting Standards Board, and the International Sustainability Standards Board. The IFRS Advisory Council is composed of representatives from more than 50 organizations with interests in international corporate reporting and diverse functional and geographical backgrounds. All appointments are for 3 years and took effect January 1, 2025. Number 9, on January 20th, President Donald J. Trump designated Commissioner Mark Ueda as acting chair of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission until President Trump's permanent appointee, Paul Atkins, is confirmed as chair by the U.S. Senate. No confirmation hearings have yet been scheduled for Mr. Atkins as of the date of this podcast recording. Ueda was sworn into office as a commissioner in June of 2022 and was subsequently renominated and confirmed for a 5-year term expiring in 2028. During President Trump's first term, Ueda served on detail to senior leadership at the U.S. Treasury Department and to Secretary Eugene Scalia at the U.S. Department of Labor. Ueda also served on detail to the U.S. Senate Banking Committee. At the SEC, Ueda was senior advisor to SEC Chair Jay Clayton, counsel to Commissioners Michael Piwowar and Atkins, and assistant director and senior special counsel in the Commission's Division of Investment Management. Before joining the SEC, Ueda was appointed by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to serve as the chief advisor to the California Corporations Commissioner, the state's securities regulator. While serving as SEC commissioner, Ueda has advocated for, among other issues, expanding the private markets to more investors while opposing increased E&S disclosures and regulation by enforcement in the cryptocurrency markets. Number 8, on January 15th, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, the chair of the U.S. Senate Banking Committee, released a statement saying his priorities as chair would include building on a bill he introduced in September of 2024 entitled the Empowering Main Street in America Act. That legislation would require the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to take a number of actions, including the following 4 items. 1, providing more information about the costs associated with small and medium-sized businesses going public. 2, mandating the SEC chair to testify on a semi-annual basis to the committee. 3, performing thorough rulemaking cost-benefit analysis. And 4, allowing companies to exclude shareholder proposals from their proxy ballots, regardless of whether the proposals relate to significant social policy issues. Number 7, on January 27th, the staff of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission's Division of Corporation Finance issued new and revised compliance and disclosure interpretations on the use of exempt solicitations. Currently, under SEC Rule 14A-6G, shareholder proponents are required to file an exempt solicitation whenever a shareholder owning more than 5 million of a company's securities solicits other shareholders by recommending or encouraging them to vote in a particular way on a matter being voted on at a company's meeting of shareholders. The proponent community views exempt solicitations as a valuable communication tool for at least 3 reasons. 1, exempt solicitations are not subject to the same 500-word limit as shareholder proposals. 2, they can be filed after the release of the proxy statement, giving proponents the ability to respond to claims contained in the proxy. And 3, proxy advisors typically amend their shareholder meeting reports to note such filings allowing filers another opportunity to make their case to shareholders. The Society for Corporate Governance reported that during the SEC's most recent fiscal year, there were 424 exempt solicitation filings, a 65% increase from the 2020 to 2021 fiscal year when 257 filings were made. The group also points out that many of these filings have not complied with Rule 14A-6G. Now, the SEC's new and revised compliance and disclosure interpretations are advising that any person filing an exempt solicitation must affirmatively state on the cover page of the filing if they do not beneficially own more than $5 million of securities, and therefore the notice is being provided on a voluntary basis. Previously, the staff interpretations only required the filer to state the filing was voluntary. The cover page, which must appear before the soliciting materials, should also include information about the person making the solicitation. The new and revised compliance and disclosure interpretations also say that exempt solicitations on the electronic data gathering, analysis, and retrieval system are not intended to be the means through which a person disseminates written solicitation material to security holders. Rather, their purpose is to notify the public of the written soliciting material that the person has sent or given to security holders through other means. The SEC staff also reminds filers that exempt solicitation filings that have been made addressing general policy or political viewpoints, but not specifically constituting a solicitation with respect to an item being voted on at the company's meeting of shareholders, should not be submitted. Furthermore, the Commission staff advises that those who have a substantial interest in the subject matter of a proposal, other than as a shareholder, in a matter being voted on, should not be filing exempt solicitations. Finally, the SEC staff reiterates that exempt solicitations are subject to rules that prohibit any statement which is false or misleading with respect to any material fact. Number 6, in a January 27th speech before the Northwestern Securities Regulation Institute, Commissioner Hester Peirce of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission criticized the SEC's disclosure program and approach to shareholder proposals. Commissioner Peirce said the current disclosure regime in which non-investor constituencies have co-opted the program to serve their interests threatens to bury information material to investors in an unwieldy catalog of responses to special interest groups' demands. Peirce added that important societal concerns are better addressed by political institutions and civil society. Peirce also said asset managers are being pressured into taking a stand on contentious social and political issues. The requirement that they disclose how they voted their proxy ballots has made them sitting ducks for pressure campaigns from social and political activists and scrutiny by ESG rating providers. Related to this point, Peirce said, the Commission has failed to ensure that asset managers think through whether active engagement with companies comports with fiduciary duty to funds that do not have an active investment objective. Speaking about shareholder proposals, Peirce said each proposal imposes a monetary cost and a much larger opportunity cost as management and the board have to divert their attention from running the company to addressing the often picayune issues at the heart of shareholder proposals. Peirce recommended that the SEC re-examine the ownership thresholds of Rule 14A8 and take a fresh look at how Rule 14A8's consideration of social significance under 2 bases of exclusion has affected the number, type, and excludability of shareholder proposals. Number 5. On January 7th, the staff of the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board posted to its website its Investor Advisor Group's final report entitled The First Annual Investor Advisor Group Most Decision Useful Critical or Key Audit Matters for 2023. The final report identifies as the 3 most decision useful critical or key audit matters selected by the Investor Advisory Group from among 15 critical audit matters and 11 key audit matters nominated by the public from the 2023 audit reports of 11 U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission registrants. Of the 26 matters nominated by the public, 13 were from Deloitte & Touche LLP, 10 from Ernst & Young LLP, and 3 from PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP. As reported by Reuters, there were no matters selected from KPMG LLP auditors that were nominated. 2 of the 3 most decision-useful matters selected by the Investor Advisory Group were by Deloitte & Touche LLP in connection with its audit report for Berkshire Hathaway Inc., and the 3rd selection was by Ernst & Young LLP for its audit report of Moderna Inc. While the Investor Advisory Group generally concluded Deloitte & Touche LLP and Ernst & Young LLP did a good job on those 3 critical audit matters selected, they also believed that those critical audit matter disclosures could have been improved in at least 2 ways. First, the final report said auditors should have, consistent with the language and intent of the underlying standard, integrated disclosure of key observations of the auditor that go beyond audit procedural details to provide investors insights or outcomes related to the procedures performed. And second, and also consistent with the language and intent of the standard, the auditor should have disclosed more critical audit matters than the 3 and 2 matters disclosed at Berkshire Hathaway Inc. and Moderna Inc., respectively. The Investor Advisory Group currently plans to again ask the public to nominate the most decision-useful critical or key audit matters for 2024 in the spring of 2025. The final report for 2023 concludes that, quote, "We are optimistic the 2025 nominations will demonstrate that our objective to improve the quality of information communicated to investors in the audit opinions of public companies is being achieved," unquote. Number 4, on January 14th, the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission announced in a release that it is giving the public additional time to comment on 2 separate but related Public Company Accounting Oversight Board final rules. 1, the first is entitled Firm Reporting, and 2, the second is entitled Firm Engagement Metrics. Both final standards were derived from the recommendations of the U.S. Department of Treasury Advisory Committee on the Auditing Profession that were issued in 2008. The SEC release indicates that the comment period for the 2 rules will be extended to February 4th, at which time some opponents of the rules believe that the majority of the SEC commissioners are likely to disapprove the rules. One of the 2 rules would require audit firms to provide firm and engagement metrics, including metrics about the industry experience of audit team members and the number of audit clients that had to restate their previous financial results. In a January 2nd, 2025 letter to the SEC, the Council of Institutional Investors reiterated its long-standing public support for the rule. The letter said the rule was aligned with a number of CII membership policies, including policies on the audit committee's responsibilities regarding the independent auditor, shareholders' votes on the board's choice of external auditor, the auditor's role as a financial gatekeeper, and the independence of auditing standard setters. Another letter sent in December 2024 by 12 groups, including a number of CII members, also strongly backed the rules. The second rule, recently approved by the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board and subject to SEC approval, would also require audit firms to provide new information, this time more details about their leadership and governance structures, as well as management of cybersecurity risks. CII sent a letter to the SEC on December 19, 2024, reiterating its prior support for that rule, describing how the rule is also in line with CII membership-approved policies. Number 3, on January 10th, Judge Reed O'Connor of the Federal District Court for the Northern District of Texas ruled that American Airlines Retirement Fund violated its fiduciary duty of loyalty by letting its asset manager BlackRock weigh environmental factors in proxy voting and allegedly engaging with shareholders on pro-ESG issues. Many legal experts say the ruling could have important ramifications for all sponsors of 401k plans, and depending on the damages awarded, could prompt a wave of ESG-themed 401k lawsuits. As background, retired American Airlines pilot Brian Spence filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas, alleging that the retirement fund violated its fiduciary duty by knowingly including funds that are managed by investment managers that pursue non-financial and non-pecuniary ESG policy goals through proxy voting and shareholder activism on their investment portal. Judge O'Connor found that American Airlines was disloyal to its worker investors. The court concludes that defendants acted disloyally by failing to keep Americans' own corporate interests separate from their fiduciary responsibilities, resulting in impermissible cross-pollination of interests and influence on the management of the plan. Judge O'Connor cited as the most obvious manifestation of this American Airlines' relationship with BlackRock. The asset manager owned a 5% stake in the airline and financed approximately $400 million American Airlines corporate debt when the company was experiencing financing challenges. Judge O'Connor noted that because of Americans' corporate goals and as a complement to them, defendants did not sufficiently monitor, evaluate, and address the potential impact of BlackRock's non-pecuniary ESG investing. Together, the influences of these non-planned interests constitute a breach of loyalty, allowing BlackRock to engage in ESG-oriented proxy voting and investment strategies using planned assets. A spokesperson for BlackRock told The Hill, quote, BlackRock's role in the plan is limited to passive index fund management, and the ruling focuses on Americans' oversight of BlackRock's proxy voting, which aligns with industry best practices. Client memo from the law firm Ropes & Gray, LLP, advises that the decision is not only applicable to plans with ESG investments, but this decision, especially if its reasoning is upheld on appeal and adopted by other courts, could cause Employee Retirement Income Security Act plan fiduciaries to consider changes to their long-standing practice of delegating proxy voting to their investment managers and could potentially result in the following three actions. One, implementing certification attestation protocols with respect to voting. Two, conducting more robust due diligence of managers' voting records prior to selection. Or three, assessing the possible use of pass-through voting where votes are passed on to the participants and beneficiaries directly. As of the date of the recording of this podcast, Judge O'Connor has not yet determined the amount of damages to be awarded to the plaintiffs. If American Airlines decides to appeal Judge O'Connor's decision, the appeal would likely be made to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Some legal experts view this case as an example of judge shopping. January 30th, CII staff posted a Voice of Corporate Governance podcast entitled Judge Shopping and Investors with Stephen Vladeck. The podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. Please consider giving it a listen. Number 2. January 28th, the Counsel of Institutional Investors, along with co-fathers California Public Employees Retirement System, California State Teachers Retirement System, the Comptroller of the City of New York, Miller Howard Investments, and the Seattle City Employees Retirement System, filed an amicus brief to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. The parties to the case are the National Association of Manufacturers and Institutional Shareholder Services, Inc. The National Association of Manufacturers seeks to revive amendments to U.S. Securities Exchange Commission Rules 14A-1, 14A-2, and 14A-9 that would subject independent paid proxy voting advice to regulation as solicitation of a proxy. Last February, Judge Amit P. Mehta of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia ruled that the provision of proxy advice for a fee by proxy advisors should not be classified as a solicitation, and that the SEC did not have the authority to regulate proxy advisors on that basis. The National Association of Manufacturers is now appealing that decision. CII has long been concerned about the SEC's 2019-2020 rulemaking on this subject, as it carries risk to the ongoing availability of critical, high-quality, cost-effective, timely, and management-independent research, analysis, and voting recommendations for CII members. The SEC no longer defends that rulemaking. CII's amicus brief highlights the aforementioned issues and supports Institutional Shareholder Services, Inc. in defending the lower court's ruling striking down the amendments. The amicus brief argues that there's no valid basis in law or policy for the misbegotten, now abandoned effort to reclassify proxy voting advice as solicitation. The district court's well-reasoned decision to set the amendments aside should stand. And my number 1 most significant development, U.S. corporate governance and capital markets regulation for the period from January 7th to February 5th occurred on January 22nd, when the Counsel of Institutional Investors, directors, staff, members, and supporters gathered in Times Square in New York City to ring the closing bell at NASDAQ to commemorate CII's 40th anniversary as a leading voice for corporate governance. In his remarks before the bell ringing, CII Executive Director Robert McCormick said, as CII celebrates 40 years, the organization continues to focus on driving long-term value for pension funds, institutional asset owners, and their beneficiaries, millions of American workers. That completes my monthly U.S. Corporate Governance Capital Markets Update. If you have any questions regarding any of the issues discussed, please feel free to email me at Jeff, that's Jeff, at CII.org. Until next time, I'm Jeff Mahoney. Thanks again for listening to the Voice of Corporate Governance.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Voice of Corporate Governance, brought to you by the Council of Institutional Investors. The Voice of Corporate Governance is a free, non-sponsored podcast that highlights critical developments in corporate governance and other important issues affecting institutional investors. The views expressed by those interviewed on the podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of CII or its members. For more information on CII and its policies on corporate governance, please visit our website at www.cii.org.